Number 1.
I was 20 years old and a newlywed. When my husband and I got married, I moved to the small town where he was then living. We both worked in the nearest major city. I had been creeped on before, even as a child, but I think because of the circumstances, I just did not pick up on it this time. I was the youngest child of 3 siblings who were a lot older than me, and as a result, I was spoiled rotten. When I got married, I then, in addition to a full-time, sometimes stressful job, I had to get accustomed to coming home and cleaning house, cooking and laundry, living at home with just me and my parents. My mom had done all that. So even though I was happily married, I was kind of tired all the time, which is probably why I did not pick up on the fact that something was seriously wrong. One Saturday, my husband and I had gone someplace, I don't remember where, and we saw this guy hitchhiking. I had always been taught not to pick up hitchhikers, so I sort of freaked out when my husband pulled over and picked him up, but oh well. This guy, Will, not his real name, seemed okay though, and he and my husband became friends, and he began to come over to our apartment and play guitar. My husband and he liked the same kind of music, so Will became a regular visitor at our apartment. Many nights I went to bed and left him up playing guitar, because I was so tired during that time in my life. Will was not a bad-looking dude, if he liked that type, and did not mind that he lived with his grandmother, and did not seem to have a job, nor did he seem to want one. He wore his dark brown hair, long, and was tan and muscular. My parents, who still lived in my hometown, the other side of the major city where my husband and I both worked, had a home empty, and we could live there rent-free, so my husband and I jumped at the chance. We said our goodbyes to Will and our other friends from the place we had been living and moved to my hometown. After living back home a couple of months, my husband came home from work one day and found Will passed out drunk in a lawn chair in our yard. And this was the first time we had seen him, or heard from him, since we moved from the little town we had been living in. When I arrived home from work that day, he and my husband were playing guitar and drinking a little. Sometime during the course of that evening, it was a Friday night, so I sat up a little later than usual. Will told us about being present at a murder just a few days before. What was weird was he told about it in such a matter-of-fact way, no emotion whatsoever. He said he and 2 older guys he knew had gone to a lake to swim, and then 2 older guys had gotten into an argument, and one had beaten the other to death with a shovel. He said he was running to get help, and he could hear the sound of the shovel making a noise like this. Ping, ping, ping. I guess if I had not been tired, and maybe also quite naive, I would have been seriously creeped. Sometime during that evening, Will tried to get me to drink, with he and my husband. Well, I have never liked alcohol. Give me a Coke or Pepsi any day. He held my head and tried to force me to drink. He did force some of it down my throat, before I shoved him off of me. My husband got on his case about that, and at this point, I decided I was going to go to bed and leave them in the living room playing guitar. Well, as usual, when I went to sleep, because I was so tired during those days, I fell into a deep sleep, soon as my head hit the pillow. I awakened the following morning around 6 a.m., and my husband was sitting on the bed, his back leaning against the headboard, and he was wide awake, and looked very alert and intent, as if he were listening for something. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me he had been awake all night, and had his knife right beside him. My husband never would tell me all that had transpired during that night, after I went to sleep, but he was concerned that while he was sleeping, Will might try to kill him. So my husband sat up all night, watching and waiting. What he did tell me was that he believed Will was actually the one that had killed that man he had told us about the night before. That he had behaved very weirdly and threatening toward my husband, and that he wanted me. My husband believed Will was trying to get me drunk, so I would sleep soundly while he finished off my husband, so he, Will and I, could be together. The idea that Will wanted me came totally out of nowhere. Just so you know, my husband was not normally paranoid like this, nor was he jealous and suspicious-minded. So I believe things had been said and done for him to be afraid like that. and he's afraid for both of us. Will slept on our couch, and the next morning, he was back to being the Will we had known before. Back a couple of months, before when we had the apartment in the other town. He was back to being my husband's buddy, the one he played guitar with. But my husband took him someplace down the road, so he could hitchhike home. He never came back to our house after that. I think he realized he had worn out his welcome. My husband, a few years later, was working in a convenience store to supplement our income, and he said Will had come in there one night. I don't even know if he remembered my husband or not, but my husband said Will was drunk and acting crazy and strange.
Number 2.
I was about 24 at the time, and living in Portland, Oregon. Portland is a place to see some pretty weird people, and not get taken notice of if you happen to be one yourself. My neighborhood was just outside of downtown, on a pretty quiet highway, and the World Food store I worked at was just a mile down the street. It was a cheap place to live, and if I had to guess why, it would probably be at least partially due to the methadone patients that were frequently dropped off at the various hotels in the neighborhood. One night at around 10 p.m., after closing up with my manager at the store, I walked to my car around back of the building to see a rather frazzled, dirty-looking couple standing in the shadows near my vehicle. I had lived in the area long enough to know that random muggings didn't really happen. The worst that would happen is that they would ask me for change that I would usually agree to empty my pockets of. And they took notice of me as I jingled my keys and started to walk over. It was then that I noticed that neither the guy or the girl was wearing shoes or socks. I began to reach into my pocket before they even got to me, but to my surprise, the guy pulled out a $10 bill and asked if I would please drive he and his girlfriend out of the area. I had heard stories as a kid of hitchhikers killing people on dark highways, but these kids looked to be late teenagers and pretty harmless. I figured they were dropped off here like the other outpatients, and decided to hear their story. As his girlfriend stood sheepishly a distance away, he spun me a story involving a magazine-selling cult that would take in kids off the street, but then make them sell magazines door to door, then pick them up and take them back to the compound. They were watched at all times. He said at the big house they all stayed in, it was locked down at night, and added, they took our shoes, locked them up so we wouldn't run. I doubted the story's validity, but I had made up my mind to give them a ride. Just then, a big white van with blacked out windows came screeching to a halt directly in front of my car. The driver was a large Caucasian man, in his late 30s to early 40s, with a shaved head and a sturdy build. I didn't get a good look at his passenger. The kids ran for it, and after a hateful stare from the driver to me, he backed out and tried to head them off from the other side. I got them inside the grocery store before he made it into the parking lot. My manager, a tall, intimidating Syrian man, called the police, as the van circled the building a few times. It eventually disappeared, probably after the men realized we would have called the police. The guy called his mom, and I drove them to a safe place to be picked up, making sure I was not followed. They hugged me and tried to give me money, but I would have felt shitty taking it. I drove away before the guy's mom showed up. To this day, I wish I had stayed with them until I knew they were safe. I hope they're okay.
Number 3.
My best friend Sarah and I had just finished our end of year university exams and decided to get some McDonald's for dinner and eat it by the edge of the river. Being the Australian summer, it was still fairly light out, so after a while, we decided to go back to the car, as it was getting a bit cold. We make it back to the car, and I immediately lock the doors out of habit, to which Sarah laughs. Oh my god, you're so paranoid. Is it because there's a black person across the road? And I frown at her and reply, for your information, I would have done it if you were across the road. She just laughs at my dig, now used to my paranoia. My grandma had drilled into my head the importance of locking your car doors. She used to work at the airport, doing shift work for 40 years, and had many stories of colleagues pulling up at red lights, only to have men jump out at traffic lights early in the morning and try and open their doors. As a 19-year-old female with zero self-defense skills whatsoever, I quickly learnt to lock my doors. Now, Sarah was a very salt-of-the-earth kind of girl. She used to walk around her neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the morning and go walking through the bush alone without a care. So she affectionately made fun of my worst-case scenario demeanor at any chance she got. I mean, realistically, I know that old man with a Zimmer frame isn't going to come charging at my car, but I don't want to risk it. Having loitered in the car park for a while, we have a sudden burning desire for ice cream. Having just been freed from our university obligations, we thought why not, and headed off another 20 minutes to the only place open on a Wednesday at 11 p.m. We parked across the road from a park and ran inside to get our treats and went back to the car to eat. So here we are again, locked in my car, picking out on some premium Ben & Jerry's. A group of maybe 5 men walk past, but we're not too worried. The car is locked and there are a couple lights around. They pass without incident. Around 11:30, we had finished and thought it was best to head back. We were 20 minutes away from Sarah's and an hour from mine. Now, our parents didn't know where we were, because the ice cream was a very spur-of-the-moment decision. I unlock the car and skip out to throw our rubbish in the bin, only to be approached by a woman who was walking towards me, wondering if she could ask me a question. Stupidly, assuming she just wanted money due to her ragged appearance, I say, "Sure, what can I do for you?" It soon dawns on me she didn't want any money, but is informing me that a group of men just tried to beat her and put her in the boot of their car, but she managed to leg it. So here she was, asking if I could drive her home. I felt sorry for her, especially considering we saw a group of men walk past. But I wasn't about to let some lady I don't know get into my car with my friend. I've seen the Hitchhiker. I wasn't about to get into that situation willingly. Regardless of me not wanting to take her home, I didn't want her to be stranded, if what she was saying was true. I tell her to call the police, to which she replied that her phone is dead. She only managed to get a call out to her uncle, who said she could come to his place, and she could stay there for the night, and it was real close. Her uncle conveniently didn't have a car to come get her, and my phone was in the car with Sarah. Well, look, I say. Why don't you go in the store and ask the clerk to call the police for you? It's well lit, and they have surveillance cameras. No one would be stupid enough to try something in there. She told me that she tried, but they had closed. I looked over, and sure enough, being close to midnight, the shop was shut. Having not seen the men since they walked past, I thought she was trying to bum a free ride. Look, I'm sorry, I don't really feel comfortable taking you. I mean, we're only 2 teenage girls, we don't know you. She just throws her bag on the floor, telling me we can search her, and that she hasn't got anything on her. She just looked terrified. Sarah pokes her head out of the car to see what is going on, and I explain the situation. Well, how far away is your uncle's? She gives us some suburb that I've never heard of. I'm a northern girl, and we were deep south. This is more Sarah's territory. Can't we just give you money for a taxi? That way you can get home, I say. She started getting really nervous, just repeating they'd find her. Look, they're obviously spooked if they're not around anymore. What if we just take you out of town, and you can walk from there? But she is adamant. It's too long of a walk, and that the men were hiding from us. Sarah just shrugs and says, "Sure, why not? Haven't got much else to do." I do a 180-degree spin and give Sarah my best. Are you fucking insane? Look. This woman does not hesitate to jump into the car, having unlocked the car to throw the containers in the bin. It was with dread, I realized that while I was prepared for an invasion from the inside, I was not prepared for someone to get in when I was outside of it. They're both in the car now, and we can hear loud voices coming from the park. Dark figures start to emerge. Obviously, these were the guys from before, waiting for the situation to play out. Apparently, her getting into my car was not on either of our agendas that night. Mine going 1,000,000 miles an hour, I figure one woman is better than 5 men, so I jump in the car, lock it, and I'm out of there, faster than I thought possible, taking curbs out along the way. Sarah is pretty chill about everything, and trying to map the location, as the woman doesn't have an actual address. Great. I'm freaking out. My legs are shaking so badly, I can barely change gears, imagining every car behind us could potentially be the group of men following. Perhaps I am a bit dramatic, but that's why Sarah teases me so much. But soon, we are driving down this long road that only has streetlights at the occasional intersection. The only other lights are coming from my car. I'm not coping very well, and I start asking the woman if I can stop. Is here okay? Nah, love. Still too far. Gotta go near the water towers. You know the place. Yeah, no. I'm not taking you to some water tower in the middle of butt-fuck nowhere, where my body is probably going to end up bloated and floating tomorrow morning. If I had known the area better, I would have gone to a police station, but this woman knew where she was. In my panic, I accidentally took the wrong turn, and she was on me straight away, saying that I was going the wrong way. So, police station is out of the question, I guess. Sarah, all the while, was cool as a cucumber, not thinking anything was wrong with the situation, that this was just a woman who needed a lift home. Being suspicious of all strangers, and thinking on my feet, I clearly asked Sarah to text her mom and tell her where we were and that we'd be home in 20 minutes. So that, 1, someone knew our location if something were to go wrong, and 2, some Miss Crazy in the back seat knew that someone was expecting us home within a certain time frame. Quite proud of myself, thinking all those endless crime shows I watched were finally paying off. I relaxed a bit, only to hear Sarah say, "Nah, Mom's asleep by now, and she doesn't care." Okay, there goes that plan. So I'm shaking again, trying not to stall the car in my panicked state. I look over to Sarah, who's just casually scrolling through Tumblr. The woman suddenly perks up and says we are just around the corner. After the last turn to my left is a row of houses, and to my right there is just acres of bushland, with, there you have it, the giant water towers. Now I slow down at the front. It's just a dead quiet neighborhood, and I begin to feel guilty for almost leaving this woman alone to the mercy of a group of guys because I was so paranoid. Maybe Sarah is right, and I need to relax. The way my car is, if you unlock/lock the driver door, the other doors do the same. Any other door only unlocks itself. The woman gets out, and she's thanking us, with what I thought was a really loud voice for a quiet neighborhood at 1 a.m. Just as I'm halfway through saying, "No worries, everyone needs help sometimes," I hear my door being yanked, and look to my right to see a man trying to open my door. Sarah screams, and a man is at her left with a giant pipe and is trying to open her door. All the doors are locked, except the back left, which is open where the woman is standing. I just floor it, not caring if I rip the woman's arm off that was trying to keep the door open. It closes as I accelerate. I have no idea where I'm going. I'm just driving recklessly in whatever direction gets me the farthest away. I look in the rearview mirror to see one man throw the pipe on the ground and start yelling at the woman, who did not look at all scared. I find my way back to Sarah's, almost in tears, shaking. Needless to say, Sarah does not laugh when I lock the doors anymore.